be impacts in focusing on the impact of COVID-19 in Australian economy. By training economists, neither associate in an interdisciplinary disaster. People demonstrate recapitalizing or different capitals act together to bounce back and bounce forward in the face of a disaster. I consider COVID-19 not only as a global severe pandemic, it's a social catastrophe and it's a humanitarian disaster that the entire globe has experienced, and Australia is not out of it. Australia has a population of around 27 million, having 6 or 7 states, and New South Wales, where I have been living, where Samir has been living, is the largest one, which is 8 times larger than Bangladesh and 6 times larger than West Bengal. In compared to South Asian regime, it's a very vibrant, dynamic, extremely culturally diversified state. So in Australia, since today, the Australian government has recorded around 6,989 cases, positive cases of COVID-19. And fortunately, the recovery rate is around 99%. Over 6,500 people have completely recovered and restored the COVID-19 pandemic, and they have returned back to their normal life. I call it as a positive dynamics of resilience. So let's talk about the impact, singular or bipolar or multiple impacts of COVID-19. Originally, Australian economy is extremely diverse. Diverse in a sense that it has 5 major regimes that really capitalize or drives the key economic contribution on its GDP. Australian economy is very, very strong. The first economic driver is the ATO, Australian Tax Office. Here, each and everyone aged over 18, they are paying tax. That's a key driver of Australian economy. Even my students who are in class, who just started their university, they are paying tax. Because here in the school, in primary school, they learn how to pay tax in online. So tax is a very key diversity here. That's the top 1 revenue generating machine in the country. The second one, it is mining sector. Australia is very, very rich in terms of mining and fisheries resources, where they utilize their human resources and work together to generate revenues. Third sector is the immigration sector. You know, everyone is aspired to be a migrant in Australia. It's their dream. So in terms of immigration, it's one of the countries where it's very, very hard to get a permanent residency, because English proficiency is an extreme country. Connotation is very, very different compared to UK, US, and Canada. And it's an extremely friendly country because it welcomes extremely impacts and far behind from Europe. I feel many of you are not getting me very clearly, and I have been signaled that my connections is jumping here and there. There is a lot of buffering. So immigration is one of the sections where the government generates revenue from the onshore applicants and offshore applicants. By onshore, I mean those who are within Australia and have been living here temporarily. That with this immigration agents, migration agencies, language training institutes, and mediocres, brokers, students recruiting agencies. So many factors related to this. And the next sector is their tourism industry. Australia is extremely diverse in terms of tourism. So it makes a lot significant amount of money during tourism. And if you Google some of the videos that how Sydney Opera House become vibrant on 31st of December, easily you can realize it. And the next one is the most interesting one is their academic industry. In South Asia, we consider university as a center for creating and generating knowledge. Even in Europe, it's the same practice. In the United States, it's the same practice. But here in Australia, they consider university as not only an academic industry, but also it's a capitalistic venture to make some money. Western Sydney University is a middle-sized, prestigious research university. Due to COVID-19, Western Sydney University has lost around $90 million. $90 million. Western Sydney is ranked in top 10, but it's not in group 8. Western Sydney, being a middle-sized university, has lost $90 million. My colleagues from Australian National University, they said they have lost more than $180 million in Monash, in UNSW, in Wollongong, in UTS. So top 10, including 38 universities, they have experienced significant economic loss and damage. And university, but one of the key interesting dimension in Australian universities is that they recruit their high performing students as casual worker. So most of the industries, most of the universities, they have casual workers like students, like masters by research students, such and such. So these industries have been significantly hampered due to the medium to long-term impacts of COVID-19. I'm just focusing on medium to long-term impact. And most interestingly, in Sydney, almost 45% populations are immigrant citizens, Australian immigrant citizen, particularly the first generation immigrants from India, from Bangladesh, from Nepal, from Pakistan, from Sri Lanka, from Middle East, and even from UK and US. Most of the women immigrants worker, they are dependent on their income for the care economies. By care economy here in Australia, we connect it to the gig economy, which is highly casualized labor. And in gig economy, they have lost their job because their engagement in 3 different industries. Industry 1, childcare industry. Industry 2, elderly care industries that we call as Vridhashram. And the third one is the disability service care industries. Significant amount of permanent residents, citizens, and temporary residents have lost their job. In response to the medium to long-term response to COVID-19, Australian government, again I'm quoting Australian government, the Scott Morrison's government has announced 3 different types of short-term economic stimulus. Short-term economic stimulus, 1, pay back at least $10,000 to the non-resident Australians who are in Australia, or giving at least $10,000 back from the super, they call it a super funding, to the people so that they can immediately manage the economic loss and damage. Second, Australia is not a welfare state at all, but it takes the welfare model from Scandinavia. It has Centrelink that supports, it is called Centrelink. Centrelink supports supports young people, elderly people, those who are jobless, who are retired citizens. Centrelink is giving quite 32 billion, I feel. My stat might be wrong. Maybe Sonia can give us a better stat. I'm really bad in number, but I can play better with the number. So economic stimulus package has been announced. It's quite short term. They have youth benefits. They have job seeker fundings. They have elderly allowance, which has been doubled. But considering the tax payment to ATO, mostly the immigrant workers and the short-term employees, none of the white Australians is ready to be involved in cleaning job. Although all jobs are quite prestigious here. So particularly students, temporary people, they are doing this kind of job. Unfortunately, I would say it's a racist government. This racist government is not giving any economic support to the temporary citizens in this country who are playing the crucial role to run the economy, particularly the gig economy. This gig economy is a growing field of interest for the social scientists, for the economists, for the interdisciplinary and for the cultural studies people to understand how gig economy is a growing field of interest, is contributing a significant amount of revenue for the Australian government. Now let me take you to my theoretical angles. That's a very common analysis for the academic and non-academic audience attending this talk. From my disciplinary point of view, I'm trained as an international development, as a scholar in international development studies, kind of critical culture studies, and kind of post-colonial literature, and kind of critical racism. This kind of training I have obtained and built up a new field that is called intersecting inequality studies. That's a growing field of interest developed by some of our colleagues like Laila Kobir, like other scholars in UK, intersecting inequalities that I have also applied in my PhD research. So building on my doctoral research, I believe, strongly believe and claim that Australia, being a very advanced capitalistic country, it has started to challenge the role of neoliberalism. All of we know that neoliberalism uh, as a philosophy, as an extended philosophy of capitalism developed during 1980s, and how privatization, deregulation has started to control our life. Let's come to discuss the role of neoliberalism in the case of economic crisis. Whether the private companies here in Australia, are they providing any funding to the temporary resident here? The answer is no. Each and every citizens who are outside the box in Australia, they say they have world-class medical service. Come on, at 2 a.m. in the night, if you go to the public hospital and in emergency, unfortunately, you will find no nurse and doctors. You have to stay at least 6 hours on the queue to be admitted into the hospital to take the service. So let's come to talk how these pandemic and subsequent crises will be mitigated. Again, we have to go back to this comment. So from this point of view, I challenge the role of neoliberalism. So it is a high time to challenge the principles of neoliberal market and free market economy. And then, as I said, one of the key dimensions of Australian economy is its tourism industry. Quite billions of dollars has been lost due to the stoppage of the international travel. Virginia Airlines, Tiger Airlines, Australian domestic carriers, it has significantly stopped. And particularly those casual workers employed in the Australian airports, they have lost their job. There are so many kinds of jobs in the airport. So airport is one of the key center where both the domestic and the international temporary citizens in Australia look for a source of alternative income, which has been completely shut down. So my students from Bangladesh, Nepal, and even in Australia, they have lost their jobs. The internationals, they have claimed only 10,000 bucks. We call it bucks as dollar. $10,000 from the super fund, which is quite inadequate. Guys, you might be interested to know that Australia is one of the very expensive cities, particularly Sydney is one of the very expensive cities in the world. And particularly there is a growing increase of house rents and people can't negotiate with this. In this country, the young people are not rich at all. In contrast, the elderly citizens are quite rich. Why? Because they are the owners of the house. They are the owners of the capitals. So in this case, I have with 8 different kind of analytical points that we can think of further to continue the discussion. Debt and capital. No one is buying the house from their own pockets or property. Everyone is taking billions and billions of dollars from the bank as loan. So during the medium to long-term impact of COVID-19. Secondly, consumption behavior. We all are restricted inside the home. Why Australia has performed well in responding to COVID-19? Because the Australian residents, citizens, and temporary residents, they have strictly maintained the social distancing. And the fine that police is imposing is beyond our imagination. Let's say $11,000. From today, I came to know that there is a little bit of slowing down of the lockdown policy. Oh, you have a nice kid, Dr. Ashish. So this lockdown has started to decrease, but no one knows if this decreasing trend continue, it will continue to grow up. And then the health workers are alarming the Australian citizen and the temporary resident that how that repayment can be settling down. And third point, what I'd like to make is the resilience, the steps that the Scots Morrison government has taken in terms of minimizing the economic loss and is it adequate enough to bring back our Australian populations in normal life? I would leave this question to you. Because in the recent statement of the Prime Minister disheartened the temporary people because his speech has impelled or given a signal that international and temporary resident should go back to their own countries. Come on, Prime Minister, we pay 33% tax to build up the country, to expand the economic growth of this country. We contribute profusely to build up your GDP. And compared to GFC happened in 2008, in the US, Australia is a very far, Australia is doing better. Last night, ladies and gentlemen, last night, you might have experienced the talk Donald Trump has given in response to the questions of the journalist. It remains the same here in Australia. There is a growing tensions and debates what has created a tension towards the Asian citizen. The traditional Australians, they're claiming COVID-19 is a disease or a natural virus or a humanitarian catastrophe, which has been carried out only by the Chinese populations. What does it indicate? It really indicates that they're kind of putting the old stigma towards increasing the systematic racism. So in Australia, this country is built on fair trade and in terms of equity, equality, such and such, which is quite good in black and white format. My colleagues here in Western Sydney, like Alana Lentin, you might have heard the name Alana Lentin, critical justice scholar, we're claiming that it's really an inhumanitarian claim that how a single pandemic become racialized.
Sajal, please, sorry for the interruption. We have to relog in now.
The colonial trait is okay. Is that traditional Australians are claiming that this pandemic has been created due to the Asian people. I frame it as a extremely systematic, pandemic-led systematic